Hello and welcome to the Render Bar. I'm Richard Sanchez.
I'm Erika Robbins.
And I'm Steve Jacks.
We're three visual effects editors working in film and television. We all have a different story to tell about how we came up to the film industry, and we're here to share our experiences. Each episode will take a deep dive into our past to share stories about how we've navigated the cutting room to find a better balance in the workplace. The ups, the downs, and in-betweens. And we'll have some great guests to share their stories too. It's going to be a fun time, so pull up a seat to the Render Bar.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey.
How's it going?
Good. Great to have you guys here today. I can't do it with a straight face. This is our first recording, so I guess we can just roll with that. This is our first recording of the Render Bar. This is pretty cool. Today, we think we're going to be talking about some recent stuff going on in the film industry. Is that right?
Yeah, some pretty big things just happened just last week.
Yeah, writer's strike is technically over. How do we feel about that?
Relieved, but we're only halfway there.
Yeah, right?
Yep. Yeah. I don't know when this podcast is going to come out, but we're recording this now on October 2nd. So SAG is going back into talks today. Hopefully things go well. Hopefully all the strikes are done soon and we can get back to work. But it's nice that the Writers Guild has at least seems like they've gotten a pretty good deal. So hopefully things work out soon.
I hope so too. I know that for some of us in post-production, we've been off work since May, and some of us have only just been off work maybe a month or two. So it's a lot different for a lot of different people. I know myself, not having been off work for a while, knock on wood, it's been great to keep working, but noticing that suddenly being off work, it starts to kick in, and the worry about when we all can go back to work. I know that's something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, it's one thing to say I'm going to learn a new program. I'm going to buy a book and teach myself this, and it tends to be fun for a couple of weeks, and you go, so we gonna go back? Gonna go back soon? Maybe.
Yeah.
So I was out picketing earlier today.
Oh yeah.
I don't know when the last time you guys have been out. I know I've seen both of you recently out there.
Where were
I
you
try
today?
to get out once a week.
Yeah, I was at Disney today.
Cool.
They were doing a WGA support day, and my partner is a member of the WGA, so I went out with him.
That's great.
Plus
That's
it's
great.
kind
How
of
was
our-
it today? How was it today? Was it very busy or?
It was good. It got pretty busy. They usually pick up around 10:30. So by then there was a pretty decent crowd. I think SAG is I think a lot of them are feeling good about going back into negotiations. So
That's great. Yeah, I was there I think I saw you both last week at Disney.
Mhm.
It was packed. That was the Friday before they finalized their negotiations. A lot of support
that
that
day
day.
was
A lot of
pretty,
support.
yeah,
Yeah.
huge.
And it's
It's-
been nice to see. It's been nice to see the talk shows are starting to come back. So we're already starting to see some influx of work starting with the
Mhm.
writers going back, which is tremendous.
I haven't seen the talk shows yet. That's interesting. Well, it's Monday now, so
I
probably
think
this
John
week.
Oliver's show was on last night.
Was it?
I
Okay.
haven't
So
watched it yet, but yeah, I think they're
I,
starting to come back.
I kind of forgot about talk shows. I think a lot of people have too. I know that's a whole nother conversation that industry is having, the future of that.
Yeah, but how have you guys been doing during the strike? Like, how are you all holding up? How's it been affecting you?
Well, for us, I left Ahsoka about a week or so earlier than Steve did, and that was late July at this point. And I recognize how fortunate we were to have worked quite a while into this strike, and now we are where we are, where nothing is starting up, and so we're just trying to offer support to the writers and now the actors.
Yeah.
Steve, how have you felt?
Yeah, I mean, it's been about 2 months, and I think we all had that thing after knowing that we were fortunate enough to work another 2 or 3 months after the writer's strike started, where other people have had to be unemployed since May. We were lucky enough to keep going, that we could kind of plan that the job was going to end, and then we can look ahead to, okay, I know I'm going to have some time off, get that trip in, get that thing you want to do while you can. But now I see, as it's 2 months later, Not only are we supporting the Writers Guild and the SAG-AFTRA, but also seeing how difficult if it's difficult for some of us for 2 months not working, let alone people have been off for 4 or 5 months. You start to see how that affects us. Not working and trying to either finding the next job or waiting for the next one to come for us. If you're waiting to get on something else that hasn't started shooting yet, the time it takes for them to prep and shoot versus something that might have already been mid-production that could start right this week, maybe. I don't even know.
Yeah, I've been off. My last show wrapped up in about mid-June, so I'm getting to that 4-month point too. And it's
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
pretty
tough. It's
crazy.
tough. It's tough as we wait. I think that's what this whole thing is, how it's affecting us is more in terms of like waiting game,
Yeah.
not only about waiting to get back to work, but also waiting to even know that any show we might get back to, how long after the writer's strike is now done, will it
Yeah,
take
how
for
quickly
them
are
to
things
get
going to
back into
start
production, right?
moving?
You know.
Exactly.
And on that note, AI being such a contentious issue with both the writers and the actors, we'll have our negotiation with IATSE coming up in just a year, and AI is certainly going to affect our careers in ways that, I mean, it's hard to quantify how much that will change even in the 1 year between now and our next contract negotiation. How are you two feeling about AI and its effect on post?
It's definitely concerning. I worry about, especially as visual effects editors, just how much of what I do can easily, I think, with advancements in AI, kind of become automated. I think one of my worries too is with the guild, like we're not visual effects editors aren't even an actual like defined job position in the guild, so it worries
Yeah.
me kind of
Hmm.
how much protection we'll have versus like what assistant editors and editors will have. I am happy about, I don't know how much you guys have looked at what the WGA, what the summary of their contract is, but they do seem to have a lot of language in theirs that protects against being able to use AI to replace somebody's job, for instance, and things like that. That I think hopefully we can take some of that and be able to use it to protect our jobs too.
I hope so. I almost see it in a positive way too, how the AI tech can actually help us do our jobs, you know, in terms of it being used as a tool rather than a threat to our jobs. It's more of a tool to get our job done a little more efficiently or faster. I can see in a lot of
Yeah.
ways the tech that can not only just as visual effects goes in terms of there's programs like there's some programs out there that'll actually start doing more AI generative rotoscoping or paintouts or things like that there might be end up more work you can do as a VFX editor as a temp um, than we are already doing right now, or it could just be more work for us. I'm not sure yet. you know
That's always the question.
yeah, it's like these tools can be great because, oh, we can do this now or we couldn't before, which could just mean more work than just letting it be temporary until the vendor gets it.
And there's something exciting too about some of looking at the repetitive nature of something like rotoscoping, something that as VFX editors, when we're doing temp work, we've all been in that situation where someone asks us to do something that seems like it'd be fairly simple, like do this little wire removal, and then you go, wire removal is easy for all of 2 seconds until it moves, which is what wires do. And so
Yeah.
there is something, and it can be a very difficult sell then to send, if your director or if your editor or producer insists upon something like that being done before you send it off to a vendor. There's the sense of, I can spend a ton of time doing something that is just going to be subpar due to either the tools or just the fact that it's really not our specialty. And there's something exciting about, hey, I can do this pretty quickly. That's cool, and it's exciting in that sense. But then you also recognize that, okay, did that take away something that would have normally been an expectation, which is now trimmed down the length of my job? Or did that trim away the length of a roto artist's job somewhere else?
Yeah.
It's
There's also the thing of what the tech can do versus what we need it to do for us.
Mhm.
I'm looking at this company called Runway. They do dozens of creative tools to ideate, generate, and edit content like never before. It says, and things like generative image expansion, where like say you have a background plate, but it stops here. You need it to expand it to maybe have the camera move, but you need exactly what was shot on the day, not AI to just make something up. You know. Um, you need to be able to use it for what we need, not so much just because it can make something out of nothing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think the AI can do a lot of really great things from scratch, if that's what you're doing. But in terms of like what we do, we need something specific to go with the story we're telling. Well, I mean, if you have access to the photogrammetry of the day, but we don't usually. I mean, you can get
Yeah.
it, but that's a step that can be a step beyond what we do as VFX editors, you know. But what AI could maybe do more for us, and it would be in terms of tracking changes, automatically. And I know, Rich, you've been great at finding tools for that, even through like FileMaker.
Yeah, yeah, and I could certainly see AI taking that to the next step. Just doing a much more complex analysis. Things that we can check with EDLs and metadata to go, has the shot changed, but you can't check things like what if the editor added a blow up to it or something. And that's something you really need an eyeball on, and
Hmm.
it's both scary and exciting for AI to handle that, in the sense of we're humans, we're fallible, so it's nice to have something that can recognize that and go, hey, I may have caught something that you didn't catch, in which case you go, oh, thank you, AI, that I did not see that. But then there is
Yeah.
then the sense of, well, if that then means that a show was previously 3 VFX editors and is now 2, it's like, ooh.
Right.
I mean, that's the fear too of then it starting to replace people's jobs when you can basically replace a visual effects editor or an assistant editor with a computer.
That would be the worry
Like,
on this
how do you?
on smaller shows where like you don't have the budget for a VFX editor, but now you have these AI tools that can let the assistant editor do that work.
Yeah, it's like, where do you draw the line between it should be a tool to help us, but not something to take jobs away from people? That's where
And
you need language in the contract.
Well, that's
very much.
something that would be great to discuss for future contracts.
Hmm.
Yeah, like
Get that language in there.
making sure that the artists are protected. And there's a phrase that I've been hearing that's been thrown around, which is ethical AI, which is all about attributing it, whether if something is written or generated, that there's some way to match back to the derivative works, so that artists are being paid royalties. And I think that's imperative. But then there's also kind of this subcategory also of AI that does things that I don't even know that they could really be done without AI. For example, there was this tool called Lol, where you feed it a music clip, and obviously this is more for music editors than for us in visual effects. But you can feed it a song, and it will split out vocals from the music, and it was surprisingly good. I did notice that there were times when it would extract sound and the EQ of sound would get a little muddier. You could kind of tell, but that'll improve in time, and that could be a pretty amazing tool in the sense of, hey, I want to use an instrumental version of this song that was recorded in the 60s at a time when stems were really not a thing, and now you could theoretically do that. And so that's kind of cool, but that also touches upon the need for ethical AI, i.e., you're taking somebody's work. So is that person being paid their due royalties?
They'd have to be, like say that becomes the final, right?
Hmm.
Like it's one thing to use stuff as temp and say, "Oh, I really love that guitar lick in that piece. I only want that though. So in my temp, I'm going to use it." But
Yeah.
if that becomes final, then yeah, you have to get that cleared.
I think another ethical question too, with all these things like what Richard is talking about, is where is, because that software is using something to fill in the gaps in the music where they're taking out the lyrics or whatever they're doing, and a lot of these models are learning from probably copywritten materials. Where are they coming from? Where are they getting it? And if you're using it technically, it's a big question of the ethics involved on that side of things too.
Yeah, I wonder how that works. I mean, a lot of this AI stuff that I've been looking at, like Richard mentioned, Lala, Mid Journey, another one, or there's one actually to create voice. 11 Labs does generative voice AI. I can see a lot of these things benefiting folks who are creating stuff on their own. When I was younger, when I'm thinking about making my own films, how you feel alone, you're by yourself. I just want to make something, but I had to go find people to help make stuff with me. But now it feels like for, say, YouTubers, and that's a whole different conversation from film and television to social media, YouTube, where if you're just alone making your quote content, your videos, that you can do it alone with all these tools and create things out of nothing. And for them, that sounds great, but for us who are more in the marketplace of like film and television, a bigger industry, how do we reconcile with that? In a lot of ways, it feels like cheating. Creating an image from a prompt negates the art and talent of an artist.
Well, it's
you
it's
know
funny you mentioned that because I've been hearing the term prompt artist, which is a phrase that I disagree with more and more because it's, when people start conflating those two, there is this sense of, I ask for these things and I use these words to ask for these things, but as you say, that separates the art, the process of creation, and anyone can want art, and I can I can contract a painter to paint me, but I can't then say I painted that because I asked for that,
Right.
and
It would be like, yeah, like Midjourney would be the artist,
Mhm.
but if Midjourney is taking things from other artists to create the art,
Yeah.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it's no different than how we do, we base our editing based on what we've seen,
Mhm.
and reading books and watching movies, and combined with our own instincts and talent. Just like an artist has their own instincts and talent, and it's based off their learning of the art world. And everything is, even writers, is derivative of all the things that have come before, but your own unique spin on it. So everything is taken from everything else, but the difference with AI is that he's not a human.
Mhm.
Well, and it's
you know
also AI often is a lot of these models are literally taking copywritten materials that an artist created. Like, yeah, maybe what they created is derivative, but it was still an original piece of artwork created by a human. And now it's basically being taken and mixed together with a lot of other art to generate something new. And at a certain point, you have to draw the line of like, is that the same as being derivative? I don't think it is.
Well, yeah, like how much do you call that, Erica? Do you find that just to be plagiarism?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think
Yeah,
it's a lot.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a fine line where influence becomes replication, like
Hmm.
you look at a Tim Burton film that is so heavily influenced by German expressionist films, but that doesn't mean that the estate of FW Murnau is going to sue Tim Burton. But you see how, and all that then to say, I watch films like that and say I love that, I want to make films like that, and that'll be a part of your product, but that's not the whole of it. And of course, even when we see people who do plagiarize things, sometimes they do it without even knowing it. I mean, the famous case of Sam Smith and Tom Petty, obviously that music versus film, but when something is that close, then people raise their eyebrows and have to step in and say, hey, wait a minute.
And a lot of that's like how many variations of notes can you make?
Hmm.
You know, that's why you
But it's
see that a lot of them are very similar. They're not, maybe not quote the same, but how much is it taking from someone else or inspired by someone else and then giving it an added bonus or an added flavor.
I think it's different though when it's unintentional or even inspired by than these models that are they are literally just taking art or
Hmm.
taking things, taking written word and generating something, basically using it to I don't know. It feels different to me when it feels like it's just being generated through a thing. Then it's not learning in the same way we do, where we see something and we're inspired by it and we want to make something similar. It's designed to take the thing and regurgitate it to look similar, but not, you know?
Yeah,
Maybe I'm not.
no, I think you hit the nail on the head. The difference is having the human quality of creation versus the regurgitation of creative works that have already been made.
I think it's
what is the
intention though. I think the
yeah.
intention of the AI is to take things and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
copy
yeah.
them and make something. Whereas
Wow.
a person who's inspired by something, and I'm not to say some people don't take things and intentionally copy them, because that happens too. But I think there's a difference between being inspired by something, and I don't think that these AI models are just inspired by something and making a new
Because
version
if
of
they
it.
were inspired by something, they would just be making something on their own, right?
Exactly, they would
And
be.
that's the
then we
day
then we'd have bigger worries.
that's the day when we're all scared, because if
Yeah.
AI just made a movie, they just released a movie by itself, like it's just in theaters, like what? How'd that happen? That'd be different than, yeah, like it is pretty much what's the purpose behind this? The purpose behind the AI tech that is writing, like ChatGPT.
Mhm.
It's there to be prompted to ask a question for it to comply and give you exactly what you're, well, not exactly what you're looking for, but its purpose is to create something based on all the knowledge that has already been input into it, which is
Yeah.
the world
Well,
history.
it's almost like, the approach where if you treat, human language as Lego blocks, so that's what you have to work with, and it recognizes patterns and says, I can take these Lego blocks and make a new Lego castle out of it. That's one thing. And while it might be arbitrary, a part of me also thinks you can't reason or explain something, you can't explain your motivation. Whereas a human, if you're writing a script and you say, I know that, yes, aspects of the script could be compared to this, and there might be people who will call me out on it. At least I have the opportunity to say, I knew I was treading
Yeah.
on iffy ground. This is why I think that this is an original idea, although I'll admit it was highly inspired by this. But, and it kind of touching back on what you were talking about, Steve, that's the time for us to be scared. The one thing I think about is, as far as having a computer having an original thought, I was just, as you were saying that, I was thinking, if a computer saw the first Terminator, and we're going back to 1992 now, because Terminator 2 was so radically different from Terminator 1, this liquid metal robot, something that is so far away in concept, could you ingest this first script and come up with this new script? Because and I think that is, to me, is
Hmm.
like the crux of the biscuit, is that's such, you're building upon a structure, a story, you have rules in this world with the Terminator and time travel, but something so drastically original has come out of that. And I think that is, can a computer do that, something that original?
What's funny is that when the way you just described that, I find fascinating, because if we're talking about originality comes from taking one thing and then going in a very different direction with it, which, not that that is, in terms of what's Terminator 2, for example, was very different than Terminator 1, but for the better. But what we see in the industry as a whole is that rather than taking something that works and making it very wildly different for originality's sake, we're repeating the same thing, sequels, franchises,
Hmm.
things like that. So in a way, if AI is is saying, if we're saying that AI is something that might take one thing and just expound upon that because it works, could we say that is that what the studios are doing?
That is
You
a,
know,
it's a solid question. I mean, the question of, can we just do the same thing but kind of change the cereal box?
it feels like it. If the goal is to make money and that's all it is, then that's why we have a lot of the same
Hmm.
sameness in the movies that are released. And that's what's really kind of funny, because I know a lot of people during the writer's strike would say, if you think the writers are the ones that are going to be replaced by AI, isn't it more so the business CEOs that are just simply making the calls of what gets made?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a different thing, but yeah, that's the scary part of what the future looks like, with AI. How much is it already affecting us, but how it not only affect us in VFX editing, but in post, but in the industry as a whole.
Hmm.
What do you guys feel about that? Like, how do you guys see any of this tech? Not only, like, because in some ways I see it, I was like I was on a trip recently where I shot a bunch of footage on my phone, and I was just going into iMovie on my phone, and it has an option for Magic Movie, where you
Mm.
click the button, select all your video clips you want to have, and then you click Magic Movie, and then like a minute later, it generates an entire like 1 minute or 2 minute video for you. But it registers the audio clips, it registers dialogue to not cut out dialogue, it includes it. It understands that this is a wide shot, it understands this is a close up. It does that and it puts it together for you. And if at a glance you might say this is great, done, post, post it to YouTube or Facebook. But that's where I showed it to my mom. I was visiting my family and I said, Mom, if you want to understand what AI is about, this is exactly it. And that's how it affects us, because suddenly it is taking what we do creatively and shrinking it down to zeros and ones, right? And that's what I see as scary for future like that. But Erica, to what you were saying with this, with the writers were putting into their contract agreements, that's what will happen. I don't see that it would take over completely, because we'd have to be putting in the words into the contract that saves us from things like AI taking over an editing position.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's exactly the thing. I mean, we have a union. We do these contracts to protect ourselves from this kind of thing where, like, yeah, absolutely. I think if we didn't have these kind of protections, you would see the studios trying to replace workers with as many generated, systems as possible, because it definitely saves money. But we're workers, and I think most of us too are doing this because it's not only just a job. We're in this industry because we're creative people. And the thing too is, I feel like nobody really wants, like, art isn't a thing that I think people want to see. AI art, like, no one wants to go to a museum and just look at AI generated art. Like, part of the reason people create is because it's a human need to be creative. So I also just feel like if the studios, or, if big business had their way and replaced everybody in the film industry with AI, it would, I mean, we
Wouldn't it
maybe
just
wouldn't be
crumble?
able to make as much money, but, like,
Yeah.
would people want to watch that? Or would the indie film industry blow up with all of us who still want to do this because it's what we love to do? And then the studios would just basically kill themselves off making their AI generated movies. It's also just one of those things where I'm like, to what end
Right.
would that really even be possible?
I mean,
I
will organic filmmakers effectively become the new niche? The art
Yeah.
house, like, oh, that was made by a human.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised that in the coming years, with this AI moving as fast as it is, right, that there wouldn't be a filmmaker out there that says, I'm going to make a movie using completely AI technology. Because I know, Richard, you worked on a film that was shot on iPhone, right?
Yeah,
What was it, Tangerine?
Tangerine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, as an example, using tech like, can I make a movie all shot on an iPhone? Answer, yes. Does that become the norm? Not really. But it can be done. And that's more of an experiment. So I wouldn't be surprised that those kind of things happen. And then the determination of how successful is it?
Well, and I think, yeah, even touching upon, without even going down the road of better or worse, you can just look at preferences. You look at something like how nowadays the amount of projects shot on film are very few and far between. But those, there are those who say it is better, those who say it isn't better. But really, what it comes down to is it's a choice, and you can go with one and you can go with
Mhm.
the other. And
Yeah.
I think, a similar thing with AI is you can have either entirely AI created work, or at least partially AI created work, and at the very least, it says this is something that was done this way. You can use it if you like. You can use it if you don't like, and it begs the question: if is there a tipping point as to maybe it all does look obvious in that kind of uncanny valley way that that visual effects can sometimes, that bad CG renderings that sort of look inorganic, perhaps that also becomes a quality of it. But is there a certain amount that people are willing to endure? And that then becomes kind of the debate of,
Mhm.
because just as a matter of this being a business venture, I think it is a scary thing to think about that. Oh well, we'll tolerate a certain amount of this inorganicness, and that's I think that's the scary thing because AI, that genie is never going, it's never going back into the bottle. But
It
how it
can't.
affects us, and and how we, obviously how the writers are protecting themselves, the actors are protecting themselves, and how we need to protect ourselves is going to be a big factor in that, because I think it will, whether it becomes, a small part of a bigger process, and whether that is due to us actively holding it out or laying rules on what it can or can't do, that's a debate to be had about, will studios or will audiences accept that, or will it be off-putting?
Yeah. Something to go back to what Erica was saying was when you go to a museum to look at art, some of it is even grasping in your mind that this was written or this was created by a human, like a talented person created this thing. And some of that is the I wish I could be that talented. I
Hmm.
can't do that, you can. But when it comes to a computer, it's like, well, computers can kind of do like almost anything, and you don't feel the same connection to a computer that you do a person. So I see a filmmaker and I say, oh man, like I can't believe you had that vision. You just came up with that and you knew where to put the camera. I wish I could do that. And I have my ideas to do it similarly, but I'm getting there. Maybe I'm not there yet. Or as an artist, I'm not there yet, but I can be. A lot of, practice and practice and practice. But with AI, it's like I can never do what that does. Just can't, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's something to say as far as in terms of how do humans connect to AI produced artwork? Do we just see it as a novelty or as actual art? You know,
Yeah, and is it a short term thing, or is it a long term? I mean, look at how prevalent 3D films were for a time, and now you don't see them nearly as much as
yeah,
you used to.
that's novelty.
That's
I think
true.
that was a boost in the economy for a bit. Made people go back to the movies, and then it lost its rhythm. But I think you were mentioning, Richard, about the CG. Earlier about like the uncanny valley, right?
Hmm.
I think back to the Final Fantasy film. Wasn't that the first fully CG film? Right? That
Yes,
was
I believe so.
not even 22 years, 21 years ago or something. I think it was 2001 actually. So just think about in 20 years how great the CG has gotten, how much better it's gotten. Imagine 20 years from now how much better this AI is going to get. And
Hmm.
that's equal parts amazing to think about and worrisome, So that's where I can see that it will, and it's advancing so much faster that we
Hmm.
can see how much it will start to become a part of not only a tool for us to use generally in art, but in terms of how much, say, Avid is going to start implementing AI technology into its program that you don't even
Hmm.
have a choice. If you want to be an editor working in Avid, script sync for example, could that just be an automated generated thing? Yeah, you have the script, but so many times I've had to write in the improv dialogue that was never scripted. Now it can just take that dialogue from what was spoken and write it down for you, and probably track all the different beats as well.
Hmm.
And it saves a lot of time. Hopefully that just saves time for the assistant editor or the visual effects editor to do other creative work.
Hmm.
Maybe it could lead to a place where, since all that, if you look back in the, in traditional film days where the assistant actually assisted the editor to learn the creative, once it became digital, how much more work the assistant editor had to do. That if that work is taken away, maybe the assistant editor can start to be more hands-on with the editor now
Hmm.
and getting more shots to cut or scenes to cut. Maybe being more focused just on sound work, or less about the management of the project because maybe it's more automated. So those are things I think about the future of the industry is could be exciting in terms of how much it can save time for the busy work, you
Hmm.
know. Even us, like doing count sheets, um, doing changes, can things like that be more automated and catch all of, already? Richard, your tool you wrote for FileMaker, your code you wrote, or your script you wrote for FileMaker to help us track every single change,
Hmm.
has helped immensely. Because before you just go by eye, match
Yeah.
the old cut to the new cut. But if you missed a change 3 cuts ago, you're going to miss it forever. Here, you're catching it no matter what. So that's a tool, but that's still a hybrid manual and automation.
Hmm.
You know, things like that can really help save us time to get back to, why do we do this in the first place? Creativity,
Hmm.
you know. And I think that's what the future could look like. Maybe more creativity in that way. That's just trying to put a positive spin on it. But I think you kind of have to. You can't be all doom and gloom with this
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, and that's the hope, right? Is that we're able to use these new technologies as tools to help us and not see them as threats.
Hmm.
The cynic in me says really what it's going to do is shrink schedules, but the optimist in me says yes, there will be more time for creativity, and the the pragmatic side of me says I'd like to believe that the truth will land somewhere in the middle. It will, if you can do things faster, people are just going to want things faster. That's just human nature.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I would like to believe then that there is going to be a situation where you're working in the timeline and you need to quickly see every single read of this, like, like, hey, let me just click this and go, there's every single take right there. Oh yeah, that one, and then, hey, we just kind of work that out real quick, as opposed to go digging through bins and scripts for ages. It's
Yeah.
one of those things, is, yeah, and I think your approach is a healthy one to it. Is there's it doesn't do anyone any good to scream and just push it away. It's here. The new phrase find AI from Avid is pretty darn impressive. I was playing with it recently, and it's cool. There's a lot of very cool things coming, and some of the products that are also coming in Resolve and Premiere, as far as creating these transcripts. I mean, that was tremendous amounts of work. That it's
Hmm.
really pretty impressive to get this stuff. It's far from perfect, but it just to get you know subtitles really quickly is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Even
And
in YouTube, you upload a video and you want to do captions, it'll
mhm,
auto generate captions. You might have to tweak it and
mhm,
adjust a few things, but it gets you going, without having to start from scratch and take
yeah,
so much more time. That's the thing. You do it manually, you can do it perfect in one go,
yeah,
but it saves you a lot of time if there's some of that auto generation coming from
mhm.
this tech, which is pretty cool. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's there's this I don't know if you've heard of this. It's called the Gartner cycle, and they have
Oh.
one for artificial intelligence. It's basically a chart that says there's the innovation trigger where all this hype coming up about a new technology, and then there's this thing they call it the peak of inflated expectations, where we think it's going to be the savior to do everything that we can ever imagine, and then it goes down into the trough of disillusionment, where it isn't as great as we expected it to be. But then, like Richard, you said, where's the happy medium?
Mhm.
Where's the balance? And it does become more of a balance where, okay, this is what we expected this, and maybe it's more like this, where it can actually influence and help any given industry. So in terms of AI, yeah, I think it'll just be, again, it's a tool, and I find that interesting that everyone's been fearing it. While I think you kind of have to shout that there's a fear to get people thinking about it.
Well,
I think
and
the writers had a huge, that was a great point to start shouting to the rooftops about, hey, we don't want computers taking over our jobs. And
The
one way that
actors
sounds
too, yeah.
in the actors, yeah, it sounds like that's a ridiculous claim, but if we don't actually put that out there, then maybe it could become the truth. You know.
the the way it affects writers and actors is different. I think that is really what it comes down to, is how different it affects everyone. And not to- I think the magnitude by which it affects writers and actors currently is far more significant than I see it affecting us. I'm not trying to downplay how much it will affect us, because it will. I just think in ways that, at least to me, seem a little less obvious. But just as a joke, and it was funny because it was uh, a friend sent me this AI generated joke a while ago, and it was both hysterical and terrifying in that he sent this sound bite of, and it was sounded like the old early 90s Unsolved Mysteries. It had the theme song perfectly, and it had Robert Stack's voice perfectly, saying something deeply inappropriate that Robert Stack would never say. And to me, it was absolutely hysterical. But what was terrifying was the accuracy of it. And it was kind of one of those things where, like, it was I had my chuckle and then thought, oh my gosh, yeah, the ramifications of this, and even I was thinking about this when you were talking about that voiceover tool. I'm sure you've experienced this, Erica, if you ever worked in those rooms where the gender balance across the shows is, if you're one of the only women on the show, they're probably pulling you in every 10 minutes to get an ADR line. And likewise, where the
Oh yeah.
balances are. Yeah.
Oh,
and,
I've worked on shows where I voice all the women's ADR. I think there was one once, I think, where I had a scene against myself.
That's
It was absurd.
hysterical. And that's even only in the temp sense, but how
Yeah.
that how that changes things. And in some cases like that, that could be a very good thing. Obviously, when they bring the actor in, the actor will be paid as they should. Um, but
Speaking of that, Rich, not to cut you off, but when you say that about the temp, things like Midjourney and the voiceover tools, the Levin Labs for the voiceover tools, you can do things where instead of a title card that says we need a new insert, you could use Midjourney to, or what was the other one? What is this? Runway, that can create moving images. Runway does moving images, right? Where you can actually create the temp from scratch as a temp.
mm,
So I could see that being beneficial for us, where we need a close up of the hand grabbing the gun. We never
mhm,
shot it, but I could take some images or create something that looks more like it. You don't maybe might not be in terms of what's for security protocols. You might not be able to take what you're actually using as a reference, but you could
mhm.
get something else, a close up of a hand grabbing a gun, low angle, whatever, and then create it rather than having to rely on just text on black
Yeah.
until we get it. But
Or, things
yeah,
where I see it being useful too is, the situations where we need a clean plate and one wasn't shot. And so being able to ask the AI, find anything. Can you reposition this shot and freeze frame it and find me the plate that, we've all had to scour
well, yeah,
for hours.
yeah. I guess that's the other thing where you can say, hey, find me the close up where she's blinking or looking left,
Hmm.
and then it can understand that and read that, and then again that saves us time, and that could be that's a benefit, so I think there's a lot of benefits to it, and like you said, it's that happy medium where right now it feels scary, but you know
Hmm.
then it's
Yeah.
going to be the norm,
Yeah.
and it's the new world we're going to be living in, which is
Yeah.
not what we all expected when we started working in this business, or even
No.
as when we were young getting into film. It's like we just want to make movies, and I'd never expected all this technology to be so ingrained. But even as easy as it is now, too,
Hmm.
before it had to be you had to know this stuff. Now it's like becoming
Yeah.
normal,
Well, it's all about just staying on top of it as much as you can and
and
learn
that's
what you
like
can.
yeah, and that's like any tool.
Yeah.
When it comes to like working in the Avid, what extra little tools do you know working in FileMaker? What other effects, scripts that that can help you get the job done to be good at
Yeah.
good at your work? Yeah.
Well, and honestly, I'm sure it was like, back how many years ago it was now when they switched to the Avid in the first place. They used to cut
Hmm.
movies on film, and that was a huge technological innovation that a lot of people had to learn. So I feel like it'll probably be similar to that in a lot of
Hmm.
ways.
and
Hmm.
and that's actually a really good example about how it both threatened people's jobs, but in also
Yeah.
some great ways it also democratized jobs, in that
Hmm.
there was a time when television editing versus film editing was so different, because when you're talking about tape to tape and queuing it up in linear editing versus cutting on a moviola, it was, I mean, you literally had different tools and it was a very different process. And so on one hand, for anyone who says, "Oh, that Avid is really complicated," it's a very different thing. But it also brought those two worlds together in a place when, when I used to when I'd hear editors speak about how, oh, it was really hard to go from being a film editor to a television editor. And then when you look at it and go, yeah, because the tools that they had to use were so radically different, even if the
Mm-hmm.
decision making, the creative aspect of it was the job of editing, when the tools are that drastically different, it's quite a feat. And now it's all done on the same tool with different nomenclature for certain things, but it democratizes that in a way that it makes it much easier for film editors to go back and forth between TV. So I think there is something about it. It is scary and threatens certain aspects of the old order, but it actually might also usher in a lot of wonderful new things too.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's true. I was listening to some people talk over the weekend from Edit Fest LA. It was a rebroadcast of artificial intelligence panel, and that was one thing that some of the panelists were commenting on. There were one of them was an editor commenting on the fact that some editors now, they're older. You get to a point where you don't want to learn new tricks. You know what you know, and you just want to show up, get to work, do your thing, get it done. And it's hard for them to learn new technology, learn new software. But
Hmm.
that is where the younger generation comes in and has that, like an assistant editor can come in and say, oh, I do know Runway. I know how to easily grab these things. It used to be, oh, I know After Effects,
Hmm.
right? I know After Effects. I can do I can do some comp work for you or make a final. Now it's, I know AI tech and I can generate things for us, that way, which helps you stand out, just as it did whenever you said After Effects or Premiere, any of these other programs. So it's very
Hmm.
similar in that way that as a VFX
Yeah,
editor is coming up, knowing some of these tricks can put you ahead, you know, of someone else, perhaps being able to just come up with these quick temps that way. Yeah.
definitely.
So
I think that's a good place to wrap it up. AI is exciting and terrifying and pretty cool and quite a lot in between. There's quite a gamut, but it's here whether we like it or not, and how we deal with it is going to be the new normal in modern post production.
yeah,
Uh,
whatever's happening now, it's going to be completely different a year from now, and then
Yeah.
two
It's going to
years
be
from now.
different by the time we actually put this podcast up in like a week
Yes,
from now.
or to
exactly.
say it succinctly, adapt or die.
Yes.
But until next
That
time, I'm Richard Sanchez,
Steve Jacks,
I'm Erika Robbins.
and this has been the Render
the
Bar.
render bar.
The Render Bar.
I'm like, he's doing it. He's going there.